Greetings, listeners, and welcome to True Underwater Horror Stories. Before we begin, if you enjoy my content, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button. It would help me out a lot so I can grow as a content creator and continue releasing videos for you guys every week. Now, without further ado, relax and unwind as we scour the internet and dive deep, literally, into the depths below. When I was a teenager, I was alone on a rowboat in the middle of a small lake, about a mile or two long by no more than 200 yards at its widest. I was mostly just enjoying the day. I dropped a lure into the water, expecting nothing, almost as an afterthought. Something big grabbed it, though, and pulled hard enough for the entire boat to be pulled about 10 feet and turned 180 degrees. Force transferred to the boat via my fishing rod and my death grip on it. The line snapped, and that was the end of it. Prior to this, my friend who lived on the lake had told a few other friends and me that one morning waiting for the school bus, he saw a huge living thing in the lake. He described it as being the size of a car and brown to the best of my recollection. He refused to swim in the lake from then on. He wore mild prescription glasses. And of course, due to this, we teased him mercilessly about seeing the lake monster. But damn, whatever took my lure that day was big. I like to think it was just a huge carp, but I don't know. I was diving around an oil rig about 50 miles offshore. I had been down about 180 feet, and I stayed down too long, so I had to do an 18-minute decompression stop. My dive buddy used his air quicker than me and had to go back to the boat. So I was alone in the water, and if I went to the surface before the 18 minutes was up, I would get the bends, and I could end up paralyzed or dead. About 2 minutes into the 18 minutes, sharks started showing up. Then bigger sharks started showing up. With about 10 minutes left, they started getting aggressive. They would swim straight at me and dart off at the last second. I had a fish on my belt that I had shot earlier in the dive. I took it off my belt and let it sink, and the sharks followed it down out of sight. They left me alone for a while, but with about 2 minutes left on the decompression stop, the sharks came back. I figured that I would risk skipping the last 2 minutes, so I swam for the boat as fast as I could. While fishing at a lake in a cove fed by a creek, I was catching trout. I was hauling in several quickly, mostly hatchery fish. But then suddenly my pole dipped and my line broke instantly. Sometimes there are salmon that make it up to the lake, and I only had 6-pound test line. So I shrug it off and reset my rigging and cast out. After 2 minutes, the same thing happens. I get a bit upset. So I put the hook back together and go again. And the same thing happens a third time. Well, I was due to put new line on my reel, so I reach in my tackle box and pull out 18-pound line. I start adding it to my spool. I set up a treble hook and bait, and cast out. Sure enough, this time I get a bite, and my pole bends down, but the line doesn't break. I fought that thing for what seemed like 15 or 20 minutes trying to get it to the surface, but my reel was small, and the drag wasn't meant for this much work. It seemed like an endless battle. Finally, I decided I'd just hook the pole in between a tree branch and wade out in the water, following the line with my hand, and grab the fish that way. So I start wading out into the water. The line goes straight into the center of the cove where the water is 12 feet deep and murky. I'm like, screw it. I dive down, no visibility. I follow the line blindly using my hand and touch something squishy. It isn't slimy or scaly like a fish, but it is definitely organic. It isn't moving really. I try and yank on it. A bit rips away and the fishing line comes free. I swim to the surface with it in my hand and I get to the bank out of breath. I'm looking at what's in my hand and can't make it out. Until I do. I toss it 5 feet from me once I realize what I was holding on to. I had a chunk of cow flesh in my hand. Apparently a cow was swept down the river and died, got waterlogged and was caught in a current that kept it going up and down this cove. My line kept getting caught on the cow's flesh, and the hide was still too strong to rip away. But my whole hand had pushed inside the cow when I touched it. Sure enough, not minutes after I got to the shore, all the inflated guts from gases started spilling out that hole I made in the flesh. The innards started floating on the water's surface. Grossest experience I ever had fishing. I don't know if this counts, but when I was 11-ish, a lifetime ago, my family went on the only real vacation we ever had, to a city near the beach. We had an actual hotel room, not a motel, that overlooked the ocean, and it seemed like the fanciest thing ever. When we went to the beach itself, though, it was gross, and I hated it. There was trash everywhere, and I swear the water smelled like what I recognize now as formaldehyde, in addition to having a greasy slick on it. My parents insisted on enjoying our first time at the beach to the fullest, and made me and my little brother swim, even though I didn't want to. I was just big enough to know I shouldn't cry, but damn, I wanted to. I stalled and inched my way back, but my mom got fed up and my dad ended up grabbing me and carrying me into the water, which was uncomfortably warm and only stank worse than it had at the beach once it was on me, in my nose and face. My dad threw me out into the water laughing, like if we were playing at the public pool back home, but I just wanted to swim back to shore. The whole time my brother had been quietly paddling in the water, too young to be as grossed out as I was, or maybe just not caring because he was excited to see the ocean for the first time. Preoccupied with me, my parents didn't realize for a few minutes that he had slipped under the surface and hadn't bobbed back up like he had before. When my mom screamed, Dad and I both forgot our issues and dove into the gray-blue coastal water, greasy film, stench and all, to try and find him. It wasn't hard. Almost as soon as we realized he wasn't with us, he popped up 100 feet away. He said he'd been pulled, but swam back as hard as he could. My parents laughed in relief, assuming he hit an undercurrent, and joked about how strong a swimmer he was for his age. But I finally broke and swam straight for shore, sobbing. They decided that was enough excitement for the day finally relented, packing up and going back to the hotel. I never told them. When I dove down to look as he broke the surface and caught our attention, I saw something in the water. I saw a hand right near his floaties, and staring at me I saw a face with sharp teeth and gray skin and bright green eyes staring at me. It smiled and flitted away as fast as it had appeared. I've never been back to the ocean. I worked on the flight deck of a carrier for 3 years. 2 deployments to Arabian Sea, also transited the Suez. Felt the call of the void, as I've heard it called. Would be smoking on a weather deck watching the sea speed by. Leaning against the railings, sometimes the thought of jumping over would materialize in my mind. For the briefest second it is almost comforting, like a faint magnetism to just do it. Then it is gone. It never even disturbed me, so much as baffled me. Also, the ocean is alien. It's unbelievably vast, deep and barren. On the surface, anyways. I would often ponder what was going on below us and obviously fantasize about deep-sea monsters, ghost ships, creepy paranormal stuff. The vast size always unnerved me. It's just something you have to experience being hundreds of miles from land. It's crazy.